News Radio 700 WLW.
It was supposed to be a big day for the Supreme Court of these United States. Today, the Supreme Court was supposed to issue a highly anticipated ruling on the legality of the president's tariffs. But it was not issued today. It was, as they say, sometimes punted. Now, will it be tomorrow? But this is the second straight time that the court has not released its ruling on these tariffs. Second straight time that they have postponed it, which is interesting for the Supreme Court. One would think that there is, at the very least, some sort of wrangling inside SCOTUS over the wording of whatever the decision it is. Maybe there's even some sort of wrangling over or some hand-wringing over a potential Supreme Court justice's vote. Don't know, but there's no ruling today, and that, again, has thrown the economy, you and me, indirectly into limbo. Meanwhile, we have the chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, claiming that he's under indictment by the federal government, which was a wrong choice of words by the Fed chair. There is an inquiry going into whether or not he has overspent and denied overspending and renovation of the building that houses the Fed, and whether or not his testimony to Congress that seemed to run concurrent to that might place him in the crosshairs of contempt of Congress. Anyway, it looks like Powell is out. I mean, Trump wants him out and he's gone. Powell seems to think this is retribution. The market is a little queasy on this right now. And there's even some thought that perhaps the economic future of this country may weigh heavily on what the Supreme Court of the United States does. Now, you're saying, well, what does that have to do with me? It has everything to do with you and how much you may be able to spend on goods and services in this calendar year, and what kind of bills you're going to be looking at, not just in terms of taxes, but in terms of what you're going to pay for these goods and services. I don't know the amount of knowledge that it would take for me to analyze something like that, but I do know somebody who is pretty danged good at it, and I've had Steve Cotton on the show many times, as recent as just before Christmas. He is a financial strategist and policy expert, and someone that understands what all of this is, if not the implications. Let's bring him on in. Steve Cotton, how are you on this glorious Wednesday?
Hey, Ken, good morning and good day to all my friends in Ohio.
You bet. Morning where you are, afternoon where I am. Tell me, are you surprised that SCOTUS did not rule on this again today? What's going on, in your opinion, inside the Supreme Court?
I'm not really surprised. Usually they make assignments on which justice is going to write the majority opinion and who's going to write any minority opinion. They had major testimony yesterday on the girls or men and women's sports issue, which took a great deal of time. They're juggling lots of plates, so I wouldn't read too much into a delay at this point. But the potential tariff ruling is absolutely going to be huge for not only the president's executive authority under IEPA, that federal law going back to 1977, but it's going to be huge in terms of implications for tariffs, tariff collections, and whether we're going to have to refund all that.
Yeah, that's it. And as someone said on my show last weekend, they may just wind up splitting the baby on this thing, that, you know, Trump gets to keep, or the United States gets to keep the tariffs already imposed, but going forward, there would be some sort of change of policy as to what he can and can't do under the Emergency Act, or they could make the administration give the money back to all of these countries and then go back and renegotiate on a case-by-case basis. Let's just talk about the implication if indeed we got to give the money back. That can't be good news for me and everybody else walking around here in Cincinnati, can it?
Well, not necessarily. We're on the way to collecting approximately $600 billion worth of tariff revenues, and the estimate is close. By the end of the year, could be $800 billion, with a trending line toward $1 trillion worth of new revenue. Now, the president has a purpose in mind for this revenue. He would like to give every American under a certain amount of income a $2,000 tariff dividend check. This could be very helpful to lower and middle income Americans. Ultimately, I think the president wants to move us away from the income tax back to a system which we used to have in this country, where we ran the government on the basis of tariff revenues. And that's not as far-fetched an idea as you might think, because we've got a much broader set of tariffs now than we ever did back in the 1800s. But this Supreme Court ruling is going to have huge ramifications, not only for the president's executive authority, but for him and his power to use trade for good policy outcomes, which is what this president's been trying to do.
Okay, let's hit the brakes there. I know what you're saying. The president is not a fan of the IRS. I don't know too many regular folks that are a fan of the IRS to begin with, but he's not a fan of the IRS. And he certainly does want to see us become more of a tariff-based operating system for this country. So I just want to go back to that vision. The income tax, the federal income tax that we pay, is not something that was historically based inside the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or what the founding fathers even envisioned. In fact, they were trying to get us away from something like that. But if there was indeed a tariff funded federal government, is it your opinion, or could you envision not having any federal tax that I would owe, you would owe, or anybody would owe?
Well, I think it's a bridge too far to think that we could do away with the income tax in its just as a concept. And tariff revenue is variable. Tariff revenue depends on exporters, it depends on importers, it depends on consumer and business choices. And I don't think you can run a government on varying levels of revenue from one fiscal year to the next. So there will be some problems with that approach. But I think the other thing that President Trump would really like to do is dramatically reduce our federal deficit, which is running close to $1 trillion, and our $36 to $37 trillion federal debt. Mm-hmm. I think he's got strategies and plans way on beyond where we are talking now, and the tariff issue is just one of the tools to get there. But if the Supreme Court limits the president's tariffing authority, it will not have any positive effects for our economy or our government or even our ability to deal with our trading partners.
And to say nothing of the fact that this should be a matter for Congress. It shouldn't be a matter for the Supreme Court. And I don't, again, I don't know whether or not, I'm not of legal mind, so I don't know whether or not they had any business sticking their nose into this. It certainly was in other courts on the way up to them. But be that as it may, it's there. So, again, to go back to my original question, if indeed the Supreme Court shoots this thing down, and they say, no, you can't do that, what kind of plan B is that? Because there's no way that won't adversely affect the everyday guy at some point, somehow, somewhere. So do you think they have plan B in the works in the administration if this happens?
It's a good question. I don't know whether they do or not. There are two parts to the tariff issue. One issue is, setting tariffs on imported goods. The other issue that hasn't gotten much attention is the president's ability to push our trading partners into lowering their non-tariff barriers. And let me give you an example. Countries can say, we want to export our products to you, but we're going to put on so many rules and regulations and clarifying characteristics of what you want to export to us that we're going to make it practically impossible for you to sell your widgets in our country. Mm-hmm. And Trump has been trying to push these non-tariff barriers down as well. That is a more complex issue than the tariffs because it involves domestic politics of those countries and the quality of leadership in those countries. But if the Supreme Court rules against the president's power to address tariffs under the IEEPA statute, which Congress passed back in the 70s, it would effectively knock his legs out from under him. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he's got a plan B. I think they're keeping their fingers crossed and just praying that even if there's a mixed ruling from the Supreme Court, it won't deprive him of a very powerful and so far very beneficial and non-inflationary trade tool.
Right. This is fascinating. Again, a 2-day delay. You don't read a lot into that. It could be just, whoever's writing the opinion might have had the flu or whatever, and it could be anything that's delaying it, but it's eventually going to get out. Steve Cotton, financial strategist and policy expert, our guest. We're inundated, it seems like, every day with some sort of financial indicator or core inflation. Today it was the PPI. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds what everything means, but the PPI today, producer price index that was released, core PPI, and that doesn't include food, energy, things that are, wacky. They'll be volatile. But the core PPI, it grew big in October, not so big in November, but it was up in November. Take that with GDP, which was an astounding number, 5.2% for, I think it was second or third quarter this year. And then look at the numbers of jobs created and jobs created and unemployment claims. Where is it right now? Where is the economy right now? Because it seems there's a huge disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. Where is this thing, or is it just flopping around so bad nobody knows exactly where it is?
I think the Trump administration and the Congress working together have put some amazing things in place that are going to prove very beneficial to the economy and to the financial markets going forward in 2026. They reauthorized the president's 2017 tax cuts, plus expanded it with no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and they gave every Social Security recipient under a certain income level a $6,000 tax credit against their Social Security income. Mm-hmm. So that means they pay $6,000 less in taxes on their Social Security income. That's big for low income and people on fixed incomes. The trade stuff is having a huge positive impact without much inflation impact so far. Inflation ticked up from like 2.6 to 2.7, which is not very much. We are still considered to be at full employment with a 4 to 4.2% unemployment rate. The signals are good, even though hiring has been slow. Companies have held back looking at the trade situation. But I was in Washington during the Reagan years. I watched what he did in rebuilding the defense budget, cutting taxes, cutting the budget, cutting regulations. And let me tell you, what I have seen this administration do in one short year with working with the Congress is potentially 100 times bigger than what Reagan did. And what Reagan did had positive economic effects that went all the way into the Clinton years. What Trump is putting in place could be 100 times bigger to the positive.
Wow. Wow, Steve, this is more palace intrigue, I think, to most people than it is anything else. But Fed Chair Jerome Powell is under federal criminal investigation to this $2.5 billion renovation to the central bank's headquarters, and then his testimony in front of Congress, which would probably run concurrent to what he had been saying in front of them vis-a-vis what apparently this building renovation costs. I say palace intrigue because for Powell it may be a very big thing, but to you and to me, it's I don't know what it is, because Powell's out anyway, and Trump is going to kick him out. He thinks it's retribution from Trump for that, and also because he's not or has not cut interest rates to Trump's liking. The market's all over the place since this was revealed on Sunday. How much of an issue is that for the markets, for my 401k, for things like that? Because anything other than change is good, this would appear to be change. I mean, is it a big deal other than just palace intrigue to the average person?
Well, let's look at what happened. Anna Paulina Luna, who is a congresswoman from Florida, she's a Republican. She sits on the House Government Oversight and Reform Committee, made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice implying that Chairman Powell had not been truthful in his testimony before Congress on the renovations to two Federal Reserve buildings. They're working on two buildings. The initial cost estimate to the renovations was $1.9 billion. It's now $2.5 billion.
You got the numbers out, 2.5 as opposed to 1.9. So if you could pick it up from there.
And President Trump went over there and, you know, with the TV cameras, toured the facilities, looked at the renovation and construction blueprints. If there's anything this president knows, it's construction. His estimate was the real end-up cost could easily go to $4 billion on two relatively small buildings. Now, for them to make a criminal referral to the DOJ, and Trump was not involved in that, this came from a congresswoman from Florida, that tells me there may be more to this than just politics. So I would urge listeners to withhold judgment until there's an investigation. Basically, DOJ has issued a federal criminal subpoena to Powell to testify before a grand jury. And if his testimony before the grand jury differs from what he told the Congress, he's in real trouble.
Yeah, you don't want to, exactly. Tell the truth. And it looked like even when that the TV camera was there and the two of them were standing there, it looked like he got taken back by surprise that Trump actually had the receipts, which it made for some good television. Steve, always great catching up with you. Steve Cotton, Cotton Wealth Management Associates, and I have a sneaking suspicion you and I will be visiting again down the road, Steve. But for your time today, thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. Always glad to be on your program. Excellent programs, one of the most outstanding programs in the nation, and it's an honor.
Now you got me blushing. Thank you, Steve. Coming up on,
Take care, buddy.